So speaking of master classes, you have a free course.
Mm-hmm. I do. I mean, yes.
Tell us about it.
You should check out my free course.
Welcome to the EasySpeak Speakeasy.
You've unlocked the door to unfiltered mental health and wellness conversations. Hey, everybody.
Hey. You had a little country accent right there.
I know. Listen,
What's that about?
Nothing's happening. I don't know if it's like social media influencing me or what, but like every once in a while I pop out with like a Southern accent or I pop out with like a British English accent. I don't know. I'm just like,
okay, Bridgerton.
I don't know what's happening. I'm just going with it, just going with the flow.
Listen, be who you want to be.
Yeah, which sometimes it's Diana from Brockton and other time it's Diana from London. Oh, God. So I'm so happy to be here today.
Yes. Welcome, everybody, to the EasySpeak Speakeasy. We are back again, bringing unfiltered conversations for your eardrums.
Unfiltered mental health conversations. And today we have a guest. So I'm really excited about that. You're listening to Diana and Christy, by the way. We realized we don't say our names enough in the beginning, just in case. If this is your first episode, I'm Diana, and the other voice you just heard is Christy. So welcome.
Welcome. Welcome and beware.
Yeah. So today on the podcast, we have a special guest named Ethan Getchell. Ethan is a student at University of Michigan, and he is making a splash in the mental health space in a way that caught our eye because we're always looking for innovators and change makers in the mental health space because it takes one to know one, and it takes a village to really change the landscape of mental health as we know it. And he, in particular, I think is really special about this month is that we have Ethan on talking about men's mental health amongst a plethora of other things, I'm sure. But June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And just like we talked about last year, it's a topic that really doesn't get enough attention. And, we are always wanting to shine a light on these aspects of mental health that aren't getting enough attention. So shall we welcome Ethan with us to the EasySpeak?
Yeah, let's go, Ethan.
Woo! Yeah.
I'm here.
Ethan is here. So glad you could make it. Welcome.
Thank you. I love both your energies. I was sitting here just smiling, and as an extrovert, I feel like I'm just going to feed off your energy for this next hour.
Yes. Love it. Usually I don't like that kind of a thing as an introvert, but I'm going with it today.
Fair enough.
It's cool for EasySpeak vibes for sure. I love that. I always joke how I in life have just been like adopted by extroverts along the way. Like my friends are like the extroverts who are like, hey, come here.
I feel that. I have like golden retriever personality where like I just need to be in groups with people. Like I'm just so much happier, and everywhere I go, I'm just like that little dog wagging my tail.
I was just gonna say the tail's wagging. I can see it. That's awesome. So before we get started, we always like to do a cheers moment. So the drink of the episode today, for those of you who are listening or watching, is look at that.
Ooh, nicely done.
A tequila mule. And Ethan's looks really good. So cheers. I modified mine a little bit. I needed some energy, so I threw in some Red Bull.
Some Red Bull. A Red Bull mule.
Yeah, Red Bull mule. Amazing. I was like, you know what? I could use a little bit more than a ginger beer right now. So feel free to modify.
I really like tequila, but I've never had a mule like this before. Like I went to the store and I'm like, where do I find ginger beer? And I'm like walking down the aisles, but I found it and I mixed it, and I even tried a little bit before, and I was like, this is actually really good. So I'm gonna hold on to this one for the summer.
Yes. Did you try it in the store?
No. I got after I made it. I just had a little sip.
Diana has obviously been taste testing too. That question.
The way you said it, it sounded like you were walking down the aisle. You're like, let me just see if this is a good combo.
Yeah, buy it. Hold on, let me just try it.
Try it before you buy it.
Yeah, that's right. That's awesome. Well, your drink looks phenomenal. So, we came across you on LinkedIn, which we keep talking about is this really burgeoning space of social media, kind of like undervalued by a lot of people, I think. But, for us as entrepreneurs and podcast hosts, we're finding it to be a really fertile ground for creating really awesome connections, people who are doing amazing things. And so we had Jesse Marsai on the podcast a few episodes ago. And you were also on Jesse's podcast. And so when he shared our podcast, you learned about us, and then we connected on LinkedIn, and here you are.
That's
so
right. Yep.
It's really pretty cool. But, I think the thing that really stood out to me when I went to your LinkedIn post, your LinkedIn page, is how much you have on there about men's mental health. And the first thing that I saw on there was learn about mental health and keep your man card. So tell us about you, what you're doing, and what you're all about, and what's happening, how we can, get involved with the movement.
Yeah.
I'll say that. And then I also want your feedback on that, because I've been playing around with different ideas, and part of it is an advertising idea, because I want to pull men into the conversation. So what catchphrase can I have up there that's going to draw the attention of young men and guys? But yeah, I'm building a mental health practice for men. Like you said, I'm a student right now, so I'll be finishing my master's in social work in December, and then I'll have my limited license. And then from there, I get to hit the ground running, and hopefully start a private practice, and one day build up to have my own practice where I'm working targeting mostly men and boys. And this comes from my personal story. I lost my youngest brother to suicide 2 years ago. So this practice that I want to do is really in honor of him, and in honor of the things that he struggled with, and the silent suffering that I really saw, and was exposed to, and really want to change and advocate for in the future with this practice.
That is just amazing. And so sorry to hear about your brother. I know that must be such a tough thing to have gone through and to live with every day. And I really appreciate your vulnerability and the way you've transmuted that into something so amazing. It was amazing. The second I saw it, I was like, oh, this is amazing. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing that. And, in particular, I think, I'm very interested in what you're willing to share with our audience about what it's like to be a sibling of somebody who is facing mental health needs and challenges. I came to this work by way of my lived experience raising my son, who has significant mental health needs, and it's been a long journey. But I also have a daughter, and it was and continues to be, something that we always talk about. She has kind of always felt like she gets the short end of the stick, because so many of the things that we had to plan or think about or manage had to do with his mental health, where it currently was, or what he could deal with or manage. And so I think, not only is men's mental health a super relevant topic, but I just also want to say that I know that there are so many siblings out there that have been impacted by way of being in a family with somebody with mental health needs. And Diana and I often talk about that. Not when somebody has a mental health need, it's the entire family has that. It's not just the one person. And so I'm interested if you're willing to share some of what that experience was like.
Yeah, I'm a completely open book, and literally because I published a book on my experience going through the grieving process and things like that. And I find that as I write on LinkedIn, I'm really still trying to find my voice, because on one hand, I'm grieving and I'm kind of going through this post-vention of having lost a sibling and going through the trauma and the grief of that. But then on the other hand, I'm also advocating and being on a prevention side for men's mental health. And I honestly don't know if I'm the best advocate or perspective for siblings who are struggling, because we didn't see him struggle. It was such a silent suffering. If there were things that he was struggling with for a long time, he didn't show it. He had responsibility. He had a cat. He had just turned 16. He had a car. He was on the tennis team. Like, there's kind of this picture perfect kid that you almost write up in a book. And then one day he's just gone. And it really, like, his story just exposed me to that silent suffering and some of the complexities that go into mental health, and especially men's mental health. I think before everything that happened with Austin, like, my family, we didn't talk about mental health, and nobody went to therapy, and that wasn't really a thing. We prioritized our physical health and education, and we had conversations. We loved each other. But I think that specific piece has only recently become a priority in my family after we had to go through such tragedy. And so my hope is that other people can be proactive and start having these conversations and say the word suicide, and so that they can spark those conversations and prevent that from happening to their families.
Yeah, that's so important. You know, one of the things that we're always talking about is we want to talk about mental health the same way that people talk about physical health, right? Like, the more that we just talk about it and say the big words, right, that it melts that iceberg of stigma that I think is really huge, and it's bigger in other populations of people in areas than in others. But I think definitely in men's mental health is one of them. And thank you for sharing your experience with your brother. I know Diana and I are instructors in youth mental health first aid. And so one of the things that we often talk about is that there are typically signs that you can see related to suicide or somebody struggling with mental health. Do you feel like in hindsight, you now thinking back, like, there were signs that maybe you just didn't know because it wasn't part of your family's culture?
Yeah, I think absolutely. We even reflected, there's a bit of like a melancholy personality and kind of just a disposition that we just kind of associate with. That's just Austin being Austin, and we kind of just let him do his thing. And especially conversations around technology, it can get pretty polarizing, but Austin liked playing on his Xbox, and his friends were online. So his community was playing video games. And so there were extended periods of time where he was playing video games by himself in his room. And there were a couple times, in the last few years, I was at college. So this was my junior year. So I had been in college for 3 years. So I really hadn't been living at home with him. But I remember those, the few times that I was home with him, there was just like in the back of my mind, I was like, I should go just check on and see how he's doing. Like, just go ask him, like, hey, how you doing? And part of me just like didn't do it because I'm like, I have more time. Like, I'll do it later and he's fine. Like, there's no need to. And so those are the thoughts. Like, I really don't have any regrets or anything that I would change. Good. We had a great relationship, and like, that's part of what I share. Like, I'm super sad that he's gone, but I'm super happy for the time that we had together. But the thoughts that do keep me up were like, man, if you've just been a little more proactive, or in hindsight, if you knew this was going to happen, like, what would you have said? What would you have done? Mm-hmm. And so I tried to articulate that in some of my message on LinkedIn so that people who are sitting at home, like playing video games or flipping through their phone, and they get that little thought, like, I could go check on my brother or my sister. I'm like, do it. Just do it. It doesn't hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It is true. Yeah, we have these like thoughts about things or feelings, and I think we all live in a very busy world, and we're super connected to technology and our phones, and being busy as students and in our occupations and trying to manage our relationships. And there's so many times, like, I even reflect in my own life where it's like I've thought of someone or I wanted to call someone and I'm like, oh, I'll do it later. And then it's like all of a sudden I'm like, wow, like I haven't talked or seen that person in like 6-8 months, like has gone by. And so it's so important to reach out like in the moment. Like we do have our phones in our hands all the time, or like, just making that minute to go and drive by or knock on somebody's door and just say hi and let them know that you care.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the extrovert in me, that's a little bit easier for me to do. Like I do try to more consciously, if a name comes to mind or I'm doing something, I think of somebody, I do just like shoot them a text. Hey, thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. Or I'll call them. If I'm like sitting around not doing much, I'll just pick somebody and I'll call them. And I like those kind of conversations. So the more you do it, I think the more it becomes a behavior and a pattern, which I've enjoyed recently.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to take up that tip. Like I was just saying earlier, being an introvert, I just naturally keep to myself, and I think a lot of people in my life, accept that as being, that's just Diana. That's just how she is. Right. And so it does make it challenging if you're experiencing tough times to reach out, and it's also not as easy for people to reach out to you because they assume that you're doing your own thing, right? And that you like your aloneness, Mm-hmm. So I value that you kind of recognize that and, have used it to turn into kind of like a healthy practice for how you're interacting with people around you. That's really awesome. One of the things that I noticed on your profile was that you had 3 pillars that you value. And, one of them being healthy masculinity, which is really interesting because we filmed one of our short episodes earlier today. And the topic of masculinity and mental health, how do those two things go together, right? And does one hinder the other, Mm-hmm. And so masculinity, mental health, and vulnerability, healthy masculinity, mental health, and vulnerability are your 3 pillars that you value. Mm-hmm. Can you say a little bit more about those? I mean, especially that healthy masculinity portion. I feel like, what does that mean to you and what does that look like?
Yeah, I'll kind of go in backwards order because I feel like the vulnerability is the easiest piece for me to kind of articulate and then get back to the healthy masculinity. But
yeah,
I made those 3 pillars especially as a reminder as I was making content. I've had people ask me, like, how do you come up with your ideas? And mm-hmm. I post every day. So sometimes it's hard to like come up with an idea or like, what am I going to post about today? But when I have those 3 pillars, I know all of my posts are going to have something to do with one of these 3. And when I do start straying away from that, that's when, it gets less likes or engagements and really doesn't feel authentic. And it's because the community that I've built have really showed up for the vulnerability and the mental health and the healthy masculinity. Mm-hmm. And so the vulnerability is a practice that I've started doing early on because I find that the more vulnerable I am, the more I can speak my anxieties through it. So there are things that I'm worried this person thinks this about me, or I'm worried that, X, Y, and Z. And when I just say that, you get so much reassurance and feedback by being vulnerable that I try to keep very little up here that is like private, that's hidden, that I'm worried about, because I just put that forward and I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve and be vulnerable with things and I get feedback so quickly. And so it helps me kind of process things, get through things, come up with new ideas, and really push forward. And so that kind of leads into the things that I'm doing with mental health and healthy masculinity. And the two are really tied together because I want to have a mental health practice. So it's interesting because there are different perspectives you could take. You could be a coach, you could be a therapist, you could be a consultant. There are like these different angles that you could take. So I'm still trying to navigate, but I think the purest form, I think the form that I want to take is as a therapist, and we can go into reasons for that. But focusing on the mental health piece through modalities, through reflection on the past and your behaviors today and what your hopes and goals are for the future. And then tying that into working with a demographic of boys and men and really trying to build with you and with the audience and with the people I write to what healthy masculinity looks like today, because I think it's a big question mark. I think it's a polarizing conversation. I think it's one that people have strong opinions on. It's one that is also not defined well today. Like, what does modern masculinity look like? And I'm kind of building the plane as I fly, because I'm like, this is what modern masculinity is. And it's like, I don't know. I am I'm a young man, so it's kind of me, but for me, it could look different for someone else. So there are a lot of resources that I've been really digging into, some role models. I think Richard Reeves is a big one. Scott Galloway is another one. I'm reading Richard Reeves' book of Boys and Men, and Scott Galloway just released a TED Talk on kind of the macro level factors that are affecting boys and men. So it's really interesting to just ask people, what does healthy masculinity look like? And just to take like what everyone says from tons of conversations, and then maybe by the end of the year, I'll be like, okay, here's what I've seen after a year of gathering data. This is what modern masculinity looks like. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. It really is such a debate these days, and I think just even on a very like rudimentary level, it's like, gender-based roles, like, is that a thing nowadays or not? And, and like, is being a stay-at-home dad an okay thing, or is it not? Like, if your wife's the breadwinner, like, all these questions that are constantly coming up, around, masculinity and how it shows up for people. And, I think today we were reflecting on, a lot of the messaging for boys and men is that being vulnerable is not okay. And, it's not okay to cry. And, and so the way that men kind of course, we're putting a big blanket, right, when we say men, right? The way that men often emote is through like anger or aggression, because that is more of an accepted feeling state when it's coming from a man versus like a man who's being vulnerable and maybe shedding some tears or different things of that nature. So, as you're putting out your messaging around this, how are you highlighting that as an issue, but then also like giving the alternative way that things could be, the alternative perspective, right? Because ultimately kind of what we're talking about is perspective shifting and, looking at things from a different angle so that we can accept who we are as humans on a fundamental basis.
Yeah, there's some pretty interesting research put out by the CDC and various research platforms have created like this man box, and it's like what fits in the man box and what has been in it and what do we want to take out and replace in it. But you talk about emotions, and you're exactly right with the anger. Like the two emotions that men are like socially acceptable, it's anger and apathy. So it's either I'm pissed off about this, or I'm mad, or that's your go-to, or it's no emotions. It's like, yeah, I'm fine. Things are good. It's whatever. And I just think of so many interactions like siblings and dads, and it's like they either get mad at something or there's no emotion about something. And so I think with that, there is a call to action to, when you're feeling joy, like be happy and express that. And when you're feeling sadness, like cry and shed a tear. Like there, from the people that I interact with on LinkedIn and in real life, I've never had someone say that they were disappointed when somebody cried, or they thought less of somebody when they cried. In fact, all the conversations I have where it's like, that was the first time I saw my dad cry. And I can think about the times I bonded with my dad, and it was that time when he cried or he got emotional about that one thing. So I think there's such an opportunity to be vulnerable and let people into what you're wrestling with, the things that you're thinking and feeling, and to build that bond with your kids and with your friends and those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Connection through vulnerability is the most authentic connections you could really have, right? If you think about it, like any relationship in your life, right? If it's void of vulnerability, it feels not connected. It feels disconnected. And yeah, it can make such a huge difference.
And that's, sorry, I was going to say, and that's really why I want to focus on therapy, because I feel like there's a gap in the literature. There's a lack of clinicians who are challenging men in this area. You see a lot of coaches, career coaches, life coaches. They'll give you habits or routines or like things to do. And what I think is really valuable about therapy, and you hear things online and people pushing back. It's like, you don't need therapy, don't go to therapy. But I feel like those people haven't been to like good therapy. Like if you go to a good therapy session, you kind of get it. And those people who have sat through a good therapy session, they're like, yeah, therapy is for everybody, because it's a session where you're heard. They create a space that's safe, and you're able to say the things that you can't say other places. And maybe you cry or you shed a tear, or they just ask you questions and you're able to come to a reflection that you hadn't thought of before. And you're able to walk away with, some stress off of you and with this new thoughts and ideas. And maybe it isn't a habit or an action or anything like that, but it's just this relief and this ability to say, whatever direction I go in, I'm going to do it with this new energy that I didn't have before. So that's what I think is really special about therapy specifically, that I'm trying to emulate and learn how to do in my practice.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've been a therapist for about 10 years, and I took a little bit of a break over the last year. I got a little burnt out during COVID, but I remember being exactly where you are now, and my master's program, thinking the different directions that I could take, right? I wanted to make sure that I could have the autonomy to meet the people that I was going to be working with where they were. I didn't want to have any restrictions, but then I also really loved, like you said, that like the vehicle that therapeutic modalities provide towards healing. But ultimately, with therapy and any other kind of therapeutic practice, it's that relationship, right? The vulnerability that relationship allows you to that space of vulnerability that you can be in with a good therapist, somebody that's a good match. And we talked a lot about that today too, right? Making sure that you find a good match, because the first therapist you may not be the therapist for you, right? And so, but that vulnerability in the relationship is the vehicle towards healing that really can make a huge difference in somebody's life. And so I'm excited for you that you're choosing to go that route. I think you're going to be able to do such amazing things, and there's really not enough resources out there for men to be really truly authentic and vulnerable. So this is a game changer for sure. I'm so excited and happy for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I do think it's really interesting what you said about the different pathways. And I think something that we have watched emerge especially throughout COVID and now since then, is a lot of people who put themselves into a category of a mental health coach, but they may not have any type of a clinical background or worked in the field in any way, but they're just sort of putting forward messaging around, or putting themselves with a title, that they're a coach related to mental health, or a life coach. And so I think it's really interesting. We had another guest on who is a mental health coach, and she kind of explained that the difference of somebody who's really working as a mental health coach is that they're utilizing their mental health experience and looking at like where you are now and forward versus what you are talking about with therapy is, you know, there's kind of the long range and you're thinking about things in the past and moving forward and now. So it's a different trajectory. But I do think it's interesting. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about people who kind of label themselves as mental health coaches, because I think sometimes for men and other people, it's easier to just say like, oh, you know, I'm following this mental health coach on Instagram or LinkedIn and they're like filling my cup and it's making me feel better. I'm wondering what you think about that, the kind of rise of people that are self-proclaimed in that way.
Yeah. Well, I'd start by saying I'm the last person to judge anybody for how they want to spend their time. And there's such a spectrum of opportunity. I think if you look at the ends of the spectrum, there's therapy on one end, and there's recreation or play on the other, where you're just hanging out, socializing. And then within that, so if you start at the play, so just your day-to-day, if you go one step over, it's skills based. It's very loose. It's looking at interactions. It's how can I pick up a skill and add to my life. And then from there, it's therapeutic practices. So it's not therapy, but it's therapeutic, and it's able to, you know, bring that same relief without going into the modalities of clinical work or having to deal with this confidentiality and things like that. And then there's the therapy piece, which is more specialized and offers the modalities. And what's interesting is, you know, social workers are only recently starting to step into this place as clinicians in one-on-one therapy roles. In the last 5 to 10 years, you've seen this tremendously increase in social workers. Before social workers, it was mostly psychiatrists and psychologists. But with just such a spike in demand for mental health needs coming out of the pandemic and technology and et cetera, you see such a need, and you look at schools and you look at clinics and hospitals. Like one psychologist has 200 to 1,000 patients on a caseload, and that's not possible. It's not realistic. So social workers have kind of stepped into this therapy role, and it's been really good. There are challenges with that too. They've had to be educated, and you have to adapt curriculum so that they can be credible enough to do that. So it makes me think that, you know, the same way that social workers have kind of stepped up to support psychologists and psychiatrists and step up into this mental health space, you kind of see that with coaches too, doing what they can. And this is taking an optimistic approach. I think there are people who are kind of doing it for the money grab, say, I'm a life coach, like, come see me for $1,500. And I would question how you can go to sleep at night. But I do think there are people that are using their experiences, and maybe their background is in lifting weights and they're a lifting coach, and now they're offering mental health help. But I think help doesn't hurt. And so there's so many people. It's just amazing to see the demand and the need for mental health issues today. And I think the acuity, the severity of people varies so much. And so I think there could be an opportunity where these mental health coaches are picking up some of the lower acuity, some of the people who are just anxious and stressed or have one thing going on. It's like, hey, I can help you. Like, I can walk with you. And that's great. And then it allows the psychiatrists, the psychologists, and the social workers to kind of pick up the higher acuity. So I think we all have a role to play. And I do question some of the ethics. And I think you do have to be careful, and you have to do your research, and you have to ask yourself, like, what am I spending my money on? Like, am I spending my insurance money to go to a licensed therapist, or am I spending $1,500 because I found this coach on LinkedIn and they say they can help me?
Yeah. I mean, I love what you said about filling the space because there's so much need, right? There's no help is bad help, you know, and Pinnacle Partnerships, which is the organization Christy and I founded in 2018, 2017. One of the pillars of the work that we do is highlighting the importance of lived experience professionals in the space, right? So these are people who, maybe they don't have a psychology degree or, you know, or even a 4-year degree, but through their lived experience, they have a wealth of knowledge that can make a huge difference in somebody else's life, And so we spent a lot of years, making sure that people knew that that was available to them as a resource, right? Because like you said, the wait lists are long and they're not getting any shorter. And that we've seen a lot of shifting and movement in the mental health space, social workers kind of coming from more of like a systemic purview and doing more of that direct service. We're seeing more specialized, like, a few years ago, I went back to school to become a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And before that, many years ago, like you said, it was just psychiatrist, right? But through demand, we're finding new ways to provide the education and skills and tools that people need so that we can address the challenges of mental health that are just unfortunately continuing to grow, based on the world that we're living in and all of that. But yeah, I agree. I think having people who can help is awesome. It's never a bad thing. And there are some people in that sphere that you're just like, that's actually not what trauma means. I think you made that up.
Yeah. There's some people that label themselves as life coaches or those self-help gurus, and they're like, buy my master class or my curriculum, and it makes me question.
Yeah, totally. So speaking of master classes, you have a free course.
Mm-hmm. I do. I mean, yes.
Tell us about it.
You should check out my free course.
What's it about? Tell us. I'm sure it's along the same lines of what we're talking about, but what can people expect if they were to download your free course?
Yeah, so it's been really fun. I made the commitment in January to start posting on LinkedIn with really no agenda or direction besides I'm going to see how many days in 2024 I can post on LinkedIn. And so I've started at the bottom of my post. You can see what number I'm on. I think I'm on like number 138 now. It's almost daily. I think I've like missed a few, but then I've done 2 on a couple of days. So it evens out. Anyways, so I've been doing that for 5 months now, coming up on 6 months. And so as I've posted and I've started building my connections, people will give me advice and they'll be like, Ethan, you need to have an offer. You need to have an email course. You need to have a newsletter. Like there's always the next thing to do. And after you finish, they have something else for you.
Yeah.
So the first thing that was kind of recommended was an email course. And so all this posting that I'm doing and building a following, what it does is kind of funnels them to something specific, like your product. And so I wanted this email course to be an introduction for men who are either struggling and don't know where they can start, or anybody who is unfamiliar with like men's mental health, what that means, or how they can start learning more about it. So it's super introductory level, but it focuses on 3 areas. I really think 3 of the biggest problems within men's mental health is loneliness, isolation, and betrayal. And so I go into what these three things mean, what it looks like day to day, how you can get support. And so if you subscribe to it, you get an email. And so it's an introduction, day 1, and then you have the 3 days, and then you have a thank you. So it's 5 days. And from that, and that's it. It's free. Some people like will try to sell those. And I was just like, one of the other things that I've learned from LinkedIn is that the more value you can provide to people, the more you'll get back in return. So my second goal, so my first goal was post every day. And my second goal was provide as much value as I can. So I don't make any money from what I'm doing on LinkedIn right now. I post every day. I have an email course. And then recently, actually, just today, this is actually pretty cool. Today, I started my newsletter. So
woohoo!
Some time. Thank you. It's
nice.
More.
Put me on the list. Put me on the list.
I like when we get breaking news on the podcast.
Yeah, right.
That's awesome.
And So this newsletter is really like a continuation of the email course. So if you go through the 5 days and you're like, this is great, I want more, you can subscribe to the newsletter. Actually, I think I've curated it now so that if you do the email course, you automatically get added to the newsletter. And so it continues each week. And so each week I call it Tool Belt Tuesday. And so every Tuesday I'm going to add a mental health tool that you can add to your tool belt. And so I talk about my experience and my story in grieving in Austin. And I talk about what's going on kind of at macro level, what things look like, trends going on. And then I talk about a specific mental health tool that you can carry with you in your day-to-day to help you or to help other people. So that's a way to continue nurturing the audience. And all of these things really blend well together. And ultimately, I'm trying to just provide value, get as much exposure to men's mental health, and help as many people as I can.
Amazing.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see the newsletter and all of that. I'm sure it's going to be an invaluable resource to so many people. It's such a great way to reach out to people that want to get, that weekly reminder that you can reach into your tool belt and grab something out, because some days the deep breathing it works, and other days it's like, no, you got to get out and run and move your body, or, so having a nice, a place where you can build that tool belt of things that feel great, or that you're willing to maybe try down the road, or all of those things, I think are so important, especially like you said, for people who are trying to figure out where to go, where to even start on their mental health wellness journey.
Yeah. And I make an effort to practice what I preach, and I want people to be vulnerable, and I'm vulnerable in every newsletter. And so I share the things that I'm wrestling with and struggling with, and things that I've wrestled and struggled with in the past. And so my hope is that people are able to see that and be like, okay, he was vulnerable and nothing bad happened to him. He didn't die, and he didn't get hurt. So maybe I can do it too.
Still alive and kicking and drinking a tequila mule.
That's right.
That's awesome.
So you have your e-course, you just launched your newsletter, and you've also wrote a book.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah. So as you can tell, I like writing. When I was in high school, I was actually in my mom's English class. She's a high school English teacher. She got her master's in education and linguistics. And so I had her for 3 out of 4 years. I had her for freshman English, and then I had her for AP junior and senior year. And people are like, Ethan, what was that like having your mom as a teacher? I don't think I would like having my mom as a teacher. And I actually really liked it. My mom and I are really close. And I actually found that she would push me harder than some other students. And for the AP test, it's out of 9. And so we would do practice in class essays, and they would get graded. And I remember one time she gave me an 8 instead of a 9. And my goal was like just to get a 9. I'm like, why is this not a 9? I swear it's because I'm your son. You can get the 100%.
Seriously?
Yeah. But it really instilled this value of writing. And I've grown to really enjoy writing even before I was doing it for an audience. I would write in a journal, and I would write in my free time. And I would really just write these stories that were going on in my life, stories of my brothers, stories of college, stories of how my parents met. And I had various internships, and I was living by myself in an apartment. And so I would just write in my free time. And I think it was my freshman or sophomore year, one of my friends was like, Ethan, you should turn this into a book. I was like, I don't know what it would be about. I don't know how I'd do that. But I just kept writing. And this would be my junior year. One of my friends came and stayed with me. And I talk about this in the book. And he's a big cyclist. And he went on a bike ride, and he actually crashed somehow. I don't know if he blacked out or if somebody hit him, but he was unconscious in the ditch. And the neighbors called, and the ambulance came, picked him up. They called me. I went to the ER. He was okay, but I was sitting in the ER, and it just got me thinking. I was like, if somebody found me unconscious in a ditch, what would they find on me? And so that's how I got inspiration for the title of the book. Is called Things in My Pocket. And so it's 10 things that I carry in my pockets, and it's the stories associated with them and the lessons I've learned. And so it's a way to, lean into vulnerability of stories, teach lessons, and have fun, have some fun stories, have some educational, have some more vulnerable stories. And then as I started, okay, I have an idea for a book and I have these stories. I was like, what do I want the structure to look like? Okay, I want to do 10 chapters, 10 things. My goal was 10 pages each. I had 9 chapters done to about my junior year after I had the idea. And then this was right about the time that my brother passed away. And so then I decided that I was like, okay, if I'm really going to lean into this vulnerability, I dedicated the last chapter to him. And I wrote about that experience, the day of, my grieving process since, and a letter that I wrote to him afterwards. And so then I finished it, and I had a manuscript, and I made a cover on Canva, and I just went to Kindle Direct Publishing, and I made it all for free, and I put it out there, and it's been pretty cool to get the feedback that I've gotten.
That's awesome.
I love that.
So great. It's just, as I like to think of myself as a writer, but I also know that the fact that you've gotten all the way to publishing, like the amount of imposter syndrome and writer's block and revising and all the drafts and all of that I know you must have had to go through at some level to get it done. It's just really amazing. And I love the whole concept of it. I'm going to have to get one for myself, get a copy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's $15 on Amazon, and I don't do it to make money, but you have to put a cost on there. And but what I really do it for is I got a DM from this dad, and he was like, hey, I read your book, and I was able to sit my 12-year-old and my 14-year-old down and have a really good conversation with them. And that just melted my heart. I was like, that's why I did it. If people can read my book and have those conversations, and I don't know, I won't hear about everything, but my hope is that there's just more of that going on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm sure there is. Sounds very inspirational.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you for bringing something like that to the world and to men and to dads. I think these are tough conversations. They're not easy to start. And so I'm sure it must be overwhelming to you when you get feedback like that from men that they have had these courageous conversations with their kids or their sons. And it stemmed from something that you put out there in your own vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Courageous conversations. I have to use that for something.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Is there anything else that you feel like the audience needs to know about you before we move on to our Q&A? Before we start asking our real deep questions?
No, I don't think so. I'm just a student and a dude, and I'm trying to share my experience and be vulnerable, and hopefully that helps you. So I'm just grateful to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Ethan. All right. Shall we get into our guest Q&A?
Yes. Our round. We have to come up with a name for these.
Yeah, questions. We do. Yeah, okay, guest Q&A is not even fun or cute. Yeah, I agree. It's just the title of this Microsoft Word doc.
I know, seriously, it's just the basic name when it's document 1. Let's do document 1 questions.
You gotta do something with the EasySpeak.
Yeah,
totally. Maybe some shots fired or something. What?
We're brainstorming.
Yeah. Tequila. It's the tequila.
The shots part, I was like, yes, shots. And then you said fired. I was like,
no. I don't know.
We're getting there. We got half of it. All right. So, first question for you, Ethan, is We live in such a fast-paced world where small moments of joy and gratitude can often be overlooked. What are some of your glimmers, those small moments of joy and gratitude that make you happy throughout your days?
I would say, as a Michigander, anytime the sun comes out, I'm extra grateful. I make an effort to just be outside. I can just feel the difference when there's sun outside and I'm able to walk outside. So just being outside, and then as an extrovert, being around people, I can tell when I have days when I sit in this office space and I do virtual visits and I do virtual class and I sit in my apartment all day. And I'm like, why am I just feeling off? And it's like, because you haven't interacted with any human beings today. So just being with people, being with the people I love and having conversations like this, I think that those are a few of my glimmers.
Awesome. Are you from Michigan, by the way, or are you just there for school?
Born and raised.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Nice.
That's so awesome.
All right. Question 2. What would you say to someone who you may run into or encounter that is struggling with their mental health right now?
I think that's hard. Broadly, I would offer some kind of encouragement or just some kind of, I see you. Just seeing, recognizing the humanness of the person. I think it's hard. I've had various people either DM me or my mom will be like, hey, you should talk to this person. And it's so hard, especially when you have no relationship with them, to be like, oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
I know for me, that's like the last thing I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
But if I'm meeting someone for the first time and they're saying their struggle, it's like, yeah, that sucks. And that's really hard. And I think that's one of the areas that we could do a better job of, is allowing people to hold space and be like, yeah, this does suck. I can go into like their really bad perspectives of people being like, yeah, your life sucks. You need to be like me. But we need healthier environments to be like, yes, what you have going on sucks. Let's just sit in it together, sit in the mud. And then when you're ready to get out, we can figure out how.
I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. All right. We've already touched base on this next one a little bit, but maybe you can expound. So mental health stigma is still very real. So how do you encourage open conversations about mental health? It's kind of like what we talked about all day, but
yeah.
For it.
But I would say more directly, it's practicing what I preach. I am still human and am by no means the perfect example of mental health. Like, I have bad days. I say the wrong thing. But I think it's having a perspective of being human and having people around me that kind of hold me to that level and will call me out on my BS. And I'll be like, yeah, you're right. Thank you for, calling me out when I'm not being my authentic self. So I think the way that we break that stigma is being more authentic to who we are, and then having people around us who aren't afraid to give us feedback or be those truth tellers in our lives.
Awesome.
Yeah, I always say that this is the sign of knowing that you have good people around you, is when they are willing to tell you the truth about yourself. Right? Like, it's great to have people in your life that support you and are, support your goals and all of those things. But I always feel like the most authentic friendships and relationships are the people who will also say, that's not great, or you shouldn't do that anymore. It's so important to have people like that around you.
Yeah.
Totally.
So we've talked a little bit about kind of how busy the world is and how busy life is, and many people struggle with maintaining like the balance between their personal life and their responsibilities, whether it's work, school, other things that they have going on. And so I'm wondering, what is your kind of favorite or the way that you manage boundaries in your life so that you make space for yourself and your own self-care?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Thanks. We thought so too.
I think on a practical level, there are things that I do to kind of organize my day and be like, okay, I'm going to put my phone on do not disturb here, and I'm going to be present in this area. But I also think when you are living passionately and you know what you want to do, and I've only recently kind of found this path for myself, but I feel like when you hit that sweet spot, those lines do blur. Like the relationships that you have are feeding into your mental health, and then that fills your bucket, and you're able to turn around and write about that on a LinkedIn post, and then that post is able to generate conversations. And so it all just, I can see all the pieces in my life really playing into this movement of mental health, healthy masculinity, and vulnerability. So I would just say that if there are areas that you're trying to create more compartmentalization around, I would do some reflection on, are these things that are bucket fillers or bucket emptiers, and how you can blend those into what you're passionate about. And figuring out your passions is a long journey, and it's lifelong. But finding those things that really make you excited and want to get up in the morning, it makes it easier to organize your day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks.
Love it. Love it. All right. And rounding us out, final question. Last question is, what is your favorite self-care strategy that you would recommend to people to try, and why?
I would say journaling. It's a practice that I've made a priority. I've been doing it for years, but I made it a daily priority a year ago. So I actually filled my first journal. I'm on my second journal.
Nice.
And when you're able to put your thoughts down on paper, it really creates a lot of clarity. And so I can tell on days when I skip a day, or I don't write, or I have something that I'm discerning or trying to figure out, when I just sit down and write about it, it just creates so much clarity for me in my life. And I think it's one of those, I don't want to say taboo, but it's kind of like I don't know if journaling's for me. Either I'm not good at it, or that's weird. And I really want to kind of destigmatize that and be like, journaling is so great. I love it. It's benefited me a lot. The people who have picked it up, they have so much positive things to say about it. So there's one thing, you start writing, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times, like when you hear people say things like, oh, I'm not good at it or whatever, it's largely like we overthink it, right? Mm-hmm. Like you literally can just open up your journal and just start writing whatever comes to mind, even if it's not a complete sentence or a thought, or if it's just words or shapes or whatever, right? Like it doesn't have to be a pre-prescribed thing. But there are also lots of amazing journals out there that will give you a prompt to get you going, if you're having a hard time. So I love journaling as well. It's one of those core components of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a modality that I love. I find it to be really, effective in so many ways. And when I can get people to journal, their lives change rapidly, but it takes a while for me to be able to get some people to actually do it. But yeah, I love it. Love it. Awesome.
I can definitely see Ethan putting out a guided journal in the future.
Guided journal for men.
Put that down. That's good. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's awesome. Better than my initial brainstorm of shots fired.
Yeah, it's getting better. It's getting better. Now maybe give us a brainstorm for the title of the journal. We'll see.
I'll work on that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, Ethan, it has been such a pleasure having you on in here with us at the EasySpeak. It's been an amazing conversation and super enlightening. And I'm really excited for all of the amazing things that you're currently doing and things that you'll be doing in the future to support men's mental health. It's such an important topic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm encouraged by this podcast and the work that the two of you are doing to speak on mental health. And I'm inspired to go back and keep doing what I'm doing because of people like you.
Awesome. That's so sweet. Thanks, Ethan. All right. Well, we'll say bye to you for now. Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.
We'll see you shortly. Oh my goodness. I am just so impressed by him. He's got so many amazing things happening.
Yeah, I was finding myself getting like a little choked up at one point. It was just like it is true how powerful it is to be vulnerable and share your story. And, you can just really tell that Ethan is coming from such a heartfelt place. And it's like, you can't buy the genuine feeling that you get from somebody when they're talking about something that they're so passionate and open about. So
you can't manufacture that. That's real. And one thing I'm just seeing on his profile that we didn't get a chance to talk to him about, he also has his pilot's license. So
what?
Listen,
just come scoop us up anytime. we love to get on a plane to basically anywhere.
He was just saying that, he would love to do an in-person podcast. So I'm like, it feels like our transportation is secured. We might need a plane for that. We'll work on that.
Transportation secured.
That's awesome. All right. So thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the EasySpeak Speakeasy. We hope you've enjoyed it. And because we know you have, we know you also are going to rate, subscribe, and review, and tell a friend to tell a friend about this wonderful stigma-shattering podcast.
Absolutely. And stick around for our meditation minute.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.